Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a good evening. It is, I guess it's about almost 10 o'clock here in Roanoke. I have finished reading your step one for your integrative literature review and have given you feedback in Blackboard. You are going to find feedback in two places. First, on your paper, look for the red font or the in-text margins, depending on what student view you're in. And you'll also get the rubric is used, and then there's some narrative feedback in the comment section. Regardless of what your level of success with part one was, everyone got feedback. It is so important that you read the feedback that was provided to you and that you make changes on part one as you prepare to develop part two. Part two, it will not be successful if you do not go back and start at the beginning of your paper and revise your work until you get ready to do part two. So the first step in part two is to correct and make revisions and tweak part one. You're going to repeatedly go back and revise your work as you work through this integrative literature review. When you finish part two, you're going to go back to part one and you're going to begin on page one on your title page, and you're going to work your way back through the paper again. If you don't do that, if you continue to just chunk it and not make changes, you will not have a paper that's well integrated. You'll have a paper that feels like it may have been written by three different people. All your concepts need to flow well. So at each juncture of this, I want you to start at the beginning of your paper and read from the beginning. When I grade part two, I'm going to start at the beginning and read my way through again. So it's important that this becomes a polished work as you go through each step. So lots and lots of good ideas. There were some common things that I want to just bring to your attention as you start thinking about polishing part one and beginning part two in the next couple of weeks. First, many of you chose to use your title page and the title of your paper as Integrative Literature Review Part 1. I'm fine with that. Know that by the time you get to your final draft on Part 3, the title of your paper really should not be Integrative Literature Review. It should have something to do with the relevance of your topic. If you would like to do an Integrative Literature Review, and then your topic, that's great. But please don't use it as a generic term. The other thing I want to remind you is the running head should be concise, but it should be relevantly concise. The words that are used in the running head are often used to put in databases that connect your work to how it can be searchable. So if the heading of your paper, if your running head is Integrative Literature Review, you have just become a generic 10 million type of paper. Try to parse it down into a brief phrase, a relevant phrase that would help someone identify what your paper is about. So just be mindful of that. Let me check my notes. Okay. Something to think about when you go through and you begin to do your literature review. And I'll remind you of this again in next week when we talk about preparing to do your matrix and collect articles. Be careful using international journals. Doesn't mean you can't use them, but make sure if you're going to use an international journal that the population that journal covers can closely align with the population that you're studying. A patient who has COPD in the United States and a patient who has COPD in London are likely to be very, very similar. But a patient who has COPD in the United States and a patient who has COPD in rural China would have a very different clinical presentation. And there is my husband doing housekeeping chores. Thank you, dear. You can tell we're tidying up the house to get the dogs ready to go to bed. That's their chair. Okay, so make sure that when you're using international journals that you're comparing similar populations and similar topics. Otherwise, it decreases the validity of your outcome if you're not actually comparing an apple and an apple. When you use level headings, the other thing that I want to remind you, when you use a level heading, you should have a level heading and then content. You should never have like a level 1 heading and a level 2 heading with nothing sandwiched between it. Each level heading should be used to introduce topic and content that's going to be under it. So make sure that you do not have two level headings that sit next to each other, that there needs to be some information in between each of those headings. So you should have a level 1 heading and content, and then a level 2 heading, content, level 2 heading, another content. They should never be sandwiched together. That's not the purpose of level headings. The other thing, when you, I think I caught everybody in this section in how you were going to go through your methods in searching through your data. If I didn't, take this as a global warning. Gray literature, information that is poorly sourced, that is not considered scholarly, dissertations, opinions, editorials, articles that come from not scholarly sources, that's considered gray literature. I want to remind you that all of that should be avoided as you prepare to do your matrix and your integrative literature review. So the big things that students get tangled up on is they love the things that are easy to read, and the things that are easy to read are opinions and commentaries. And those are great if you're trying to collect expert opinions and you're doing a Delphi study and you want to know, what do all the experts say about this? It's okay to look at opinions and commentaries for that purpose. For your purposes, you're not going to do that. You're going to stick with the evidence-based research articles. So if you take away commentaries, you take away dissertations and thesis, unpublished works, the other thing that's going to make you nuts, and you're going to want to do this, and I'm going to warn you not to do this, is you're going to find existing systematic literature reviews. They've already published an answer to your research question. You are not going to use those in your matrix, and here's why. Integrative literature reviews are of primary sourced documents, primary sourced articles, and that means that they are the original source of the information. Integrative literature reviews are a gold standard. They are fantastic. If you are planning a research study of your own, you're going to want to go in and find out what systematic literature reviews say about a common topic. That's not what you're doing. You're not doing a new research idea. You're doing an integrative research paper, which means you've got to use primary sourced information. So you can look at the existing published systematic literature reviews just to get an idea of concepts, but you're not going to use them in your matrix, and you're not going to use them in your supporting documents. You're only going to use primary sourced information. So let me give you a caveat. Now that I've told you never do it, let's say that you have picked a super narrow topic and you cannot find anything on your topic, but you have run into someone who has done a systematic literature review on your topic. And they, in their articles, have said, hey, this is a really narrow topic. That's the reason we wanted to pull together this systematic literature review. And here's what we found. And they break down all of the articles that they found and their findings. You can't cite that, but what you can do is go to the very end and look at read the thing. And then go to the very end and look at their literature. Look at their reference list. You can use that reference list to back work locating their original sources and look at their sources to see if they align with yours. It is a tedious process. You'd need to go back to part 1 and explain that you've kind of cannibalized the existing systematic literature review for primary sourced documents. And if you have to do this, you and I are going to have a conversation about this before you do it. But you will see this as a research method, typically on a narrow topic. It is not a fabulous way to do things. There are times that you just get stuck, and there's really some just real limitations. So know that you may hear of that, but that's a zebra, not a horse. So I don't want you to do that unless you have a conversation with me and we realize that there's no other way to find primary sourced information. So as you move forward in part 2, you're going to remember, take out all that gray material, all those editorials, the dissertations, the opinion stuff. Can't use that. You're going to take out the gold standard. It's going to make your head hurt to do it, but you're not going to use it because it is a collection of documents, a collection of articles. They're not the primary result is not primary sourced information, so it doesn't qualify for an ILR. Okay. Now that we've talked about sorting out all of your materials, I know many of you are trying to get going and wrap this project up, so I wanted to mention that this week, even though it's not due for week 5. I know you're working on it, so I don't want you spending a lot of time looking at the wrong stuff. Okay. Oh, a few of you chose to, in your integrative literature review, spent some time in your paper explaining the value of an integrative literature review and why you use it. If you did it, I didn't tell you not to do it, and I didn't pick it apart. What I want to do is give you permission to remove it. It is not essential for you to say, this is why I'm writing an integrative literature review. Ideally, and if you were going to publish this, that wouldn't be in there at all. You would start out with an introduction to your issue. You would introduce your research question. You would explain your methodology, and then you would go into your findings and your analysis of your findings. You would not explain the reason and the background for an integrative literature review. Commonly because the person reading your work should be someone that's fluent with research and doesn't need it explained to them. If it gave you a framework and you were comfortable with that, that's okay. Just know that if you wanted to do something with this later, that's got to move out. It also takes up pages that isn't really essential. It's a writing preference, but I do want you to know you have my permission. If it feels wonky and doesn't fit real well, take it out. Start out with an introduction to your topic and move on from there. Okay, I think I'm done from this week. Let's talk briefly about next week. You have your first practicum log. I'm going to encourage you, before you start writing for practicum log 1 for 620, go back and make sure that 617, 618, and 619's time logs are correct. That when you look at your shift column total, the one that has the all of your hours calculated, that column reflects all of the hours you have used. So at this point, you should only be missing 50 hours. You could have a subset of those for your goals and objectives. They may be in your goals and objective column. So I think the most you could have for those is 20. But they're going to be a subsection of the primary column. So if your primary column, the one that does all of your roll-ups, does not have at least 150 or more hours, then you need to correct your time log and make sure that it does and has the correct time lined up for you. Okay. Okay, time logs, got it. So if everything is squared away with your time logs, then before you write your practicum log number 1, make sure that you enter your time for this time period and then write your log. So if you were in the clinical setting and the practicum setting for 3 days, you're going to have 3 time entries and then you're going to do your log. Each log has all the information about those 3 days on their separate pages. Remember, each log can have 8 days covered in it. So you should have 1 submission, 1 log. I want to remind you that your practicum logs should be a synthesis of your existing goals and objectives related to your practicum experiences that then tie in to the NLN nurse educator scope and standards, and those should all link back to prior learning and your current experiences. All 4 of those things need to be covered well in your practicum logs, and preferably concisely. If you have questions or concerns about that, please reach out to me. The other thing I want to remind you is your last part of your portfolio. One of the documents you're going to have to submit is your original goals and objective tool with red font that states when each of your goals and objectives has been accomplished. Not just your goals, but each of those objectives. So if you're not sure, I'm going to encourage you to print out your existing goals and objective document, the one you wrote in 618. And you're going to look at that and go back to 618 logs and start going through and finding out when you met them and putting in dates on those. And if you have found that you have not if you haven't closed any of those out, you're going to be very diligent in the next couple of weeks of wrapping all of those up so you have a closing date that you've accomplished those. That is a requirement for us to be able to demonstrate that our students who have completed our master's program have completed the goals that they set out for completion. That's an accreditation standard. If we let you write goals and objectives and didn't track and didn't care whether you accomplished those goals and objectives, we wouldn't be able to state that we have any rigor in our process, nor that you've accomplished anything. Our hope is that you have not wandered out in the forest and gotten lost. So go back to your original goals and objectives, make sure you're on track, and make sure that you're beginning to track their conclusion prior to the completion of 620. That is an expectation prior to your graduation. So last thing, your portfolio part 2. This part's pretty straightforward. Your which is it? I think it's part 3. Part 3 has you creating a list of goals and objectives for after graduation. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Folks, it is a specific goal that is then given some steps and how you're going to do it. So if goal 1 is to in 1 year, you want to be prepared you want to successfully pass the Certified Nurse Educator exam. That's your goal in 1 year. Then think about what steps would be required for you to actually take and pass the CNE exam. Would you take a prep course? Would you work with a mentor? Would you find out what the required clinical hours and practice hours are and make plans to accomplish the required hours? Those are practical steps that help you accomplish that goal. That's what we're looking for here. So goal for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years with precise steps and how you'll get there. Make them measurable. And the last thing you've got are your professional development. Your professional development, when we're talking about professional development, we're talking about the things in the past 5 years that you have accomplished that have supported your educational development. So some of that is going to be Liberty coursework. That's okay to put in there. Have you attended conferences, seminars, in-services, required training to keep your job? All the things that you would be getting CEU hours for or continuing learning hours, all that stuff counts. If you have been a busy working parent for babies or young babies and you have done a whole lot of very little, that's okay. Put whatever you have accomplished in your professional development section. Some folks, just by the design of their job, have a huge list of things they've done because it's been required or they've had that flexibility to accomplish that. Some folks, depending on their level of demand with their personal life, their home life, and work life, there are very few things. I'm not grading you on whether you have a long list or a short list. I'm evaluating whether you are able to organize your thinking around what professional development should look like and create a section in your portfolio for that. So make pretty lists, make them clear. I would use bullet points for both of these sections, not crazy paragraphs. Remember, you want to be attuned to your viewer. Let them click through your portfolio without having to read large lengthy paragraphs. Be user friendly. Okay. I think that is it. I feel like I am tired and I am rambling, so please forgive me. And I know I'm rambling because this is over 15 minutes. Know that I'm here. If you are struggling with your portfolio or your ILR, I am here. We can talk by phone. We can chat by email. Make sure you have clarity on steps before you move to the next one. I am here. I am praying for you. Let me know how you are and how I can support you. Have a great week.